This is CityCast Twin Cities. I'm Sean McPherson, and here's what the cities are talking about. Dr. DeWayne Davis, when is it too cold to walk 2 blocks?
When it's below 10 degrees.
Winter, what's your take on when it is too cold to walk 2 blocks?
You know, Sean, I'm moving on Saturday in negative 20 degrees, so I'm manifesting negative 20 degrees.
I wish you luck. For my kids, it's 20 degrees or colder. We drive the 2 blocks to school. And I think for me as a person, I'm about with Dr. DeWayne Davis, like 10 degrees. After that, I'm going to try to be driving if it's more than a block. Today on CityCast Twin Cities, we will talk with Dr. DeWayne Davis about the recent protest inside City's Church in St. Paul. We'll also cover a new way to get out there in the dating world, and we're going to highlight some of our favorite independent journalists in the Twin Cities. Dr. DeWayne Davis, it is an honor to have you on the show. Your work and passion has brought you into houses of worship, including serving as the lead minister of Plymouth Congregation Church, and your work and passion has also brought you into the political sphere. You've recently run for mayor of Minneapolis, and you've also served as an aide to a number of representatives in Washington, D.C. I'm so thankful to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Winter Keefer, we are commonly hearing your voice on the podcast, but it is always an honor to have you. You are a local journalist and a spectacular contributor on CityCast Twin Cities. Thank you also for being here.
Yep, thanks for having me back, Sean.
Now, on Sunday, we saw political activism inside a house of worship, and so I'm very thankful that we can talk to somebody who's lived and worked in both spheres today. On Sunday, a group of protesters, including civil rights activist Nikema Levy-Armstrong, who I should add because it's germane to this conversation, is herself a lawyer and a preacher. She held a protest at City's Church on Summit Avenue. And her group went to this church because David Easterwood serves as an acting field office director for ICE, but he also serves as a pastor at City's Church. And Dr. DeWayne Davis, I just wanted to ask, how did you first hear of this story and what did you initially make of it?
I first heard of this story. Actually, I was traveling to participate in an MLK observance in out of town. And I had to preach that morning, but I saw it online, and I'm very much connected to many of the activists here on the ground. So I saw it right away, and I think my first thought was, wow, they really upped the ante, and that's courageous, that's brave, that's risky. But if you are in this fight for justice, that may be the choice that you and your organization will probably make. And it's always interesting to observe it when it happens.
Now, when you say it's risky, there's a number of different levels of potential risk. It could be strategically risky. It could be legally risky, which again, I think is in the conversation. And I don't think if you say something is legally risky, I don't think you immediately say it's wrong. A lot of our heroes, a lot of the people that we really revere have spent nights in jail for very good reasons. It also could be, in the eyes of some, especially potentially somebody connected to the church, morally wrong. And I want to ask about that as well. But I did do a modicum of research. I just want to mention this. Some of the people who were present at that protest could be charged using the FACE Act, which comes from 1994. And that act makes it a crime to intimidate or interfere with any person, and now I'll quote from the act, seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship, or attempting to obtain or provide reproductive health services. So that's to give a little bit of legal context as to what might come in the legal sphere. There's also a potential for disorderly conduct, which would be a state situation, whereas this FACE Act is a federal law. I already said this, doing something illegal isn't always wrong. A lot of my heroes have done many illegal things. Dr. DeWayne Davis, morally, do you think that this protest was morally sound?
Yes, but I give you a qualifier here. I wasn't involved in the discussions and the planning of what they do, but I guarantee you that this action in the planning, in the discussion, especially given that I know Nikema Levy-Armstrong, the people who were doing this had a range of questions and conversation about what it meant. I know that they talked about the legal risks. I know that they talked about the moral challenge here. I guarantee you there was somebody at the table who said we shouldn't do it. You don't undertake this kind of action without having a full conversation about the risk, the legal risk, who's going to get arrested, who might get arrested. If you do, what may be the potential risk that you're encountering, especially given the criticisms that they've gotten. I'm sure they had a lot of conversation about how people would view it and whether or not it was worth to continue the action, knowing that the people will call you certain kinds of things. By the way, this happened with MLK in Selma and Birmingham. This happened with ACT UP in the 80s when they did the infamous or famous action at St. Patrick's Cathedral in 1989. Full discussion about whether or not we should do this, whether or not we gain what we want, whether or not this is the right thing to do. And there are many people, I guarantee you, told Miss Armstrong that they disagreed with it. So even for those what I call armchair analysts and keyboard commandos who came out, trust me, there was a lot of conversation about this before they undertook it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've even heard a little bit about that conversation. I was talking to somebody who's been very active in protest groups this weekend, and there had been continued conversation after the fact, thinking about if the action is something that people are doing that they don't want to see ICE do. We talked about protected zones and how places of worship are no longer protected from ICE. There's a lot of fear of, say, ICE entering a mosque and things like that. And so the question that some protesters who I spoke with were asking was, should we be doing the action that we're worried about ICE doing? In this particular climate, how does that make sort of this situation unique to what's happening now and that ability that didn't exist prior to last year for ICE to enter places of worship too?
I'll start with to say this. There's a positional difference here. Mm-hmm. It's one thing if the government is doing something, and it's another thing if citizens, by the very differential in power, the state has the power of life and death in its hands. And so the implications of its doing something, and given the constitutional protections that are afforded citizens and religion, it raises a whole another way. So I'll just start with that. But the second thing I would say, I am loath to second guess an action, but other issues around the appropriateness of an action, the slippery slope of an action, the precedent setting that it might do. I just want to remind people that protests, marches, and acts of civil disobedience are by their nature and purpose disruptive, inconvenient, frustrating, and borderline illegal. And so it is done already because the people have decided that they need to create tension. They need to create a crisis, by the way, that most often is forced because government or some other powerful institution has not responded to the demands of the people who are making it. And so that differential of power comes into the very nature of why this action is a little bit different than what an ICE agent is doing. Look, I've been protested many times. I'm a gay man, and I have been targeted by the religious right for leading people astray. And when I was pastor here at All God's Church on 31st and Park, I think on at least 2 occasions, we had them come out and protest us in the front of our church. And I am convinced the only reason they didn't come in is because they didn't want to be around those icky gay people. And then when I became lead minister of Plymouth, I had a full security team. So we were always working on protocols in preparation for a potential action inside the church. So I just really hold that tension because as a gay Black man, I really do believe in the power of protest and acts of civil disobedience. And I understand the nature of protest and acts of civil disobedience to be disruptive. They are designed to make us uncomfortable. They are designed to inconvenience us. And I know there's some activists who would not have engaged in that action, who would have advised not to do it. I have a question always when these situations happen, because I had the same question when we did actions around the killing of Jamar Clark, actions around the killing of George Floyd and Philando Castillo. If you're more upset about our protest action because of the injustice than you are about the injustice, I want to invite you to do some reflection. And I found a lot of people who are more upset about the action than they are about the reason the action was taken.
Definitely. And I think that that actually calls to a point, too, where you were talking about how protest is meant to be disruptive. Does that make it so people are more likely to ask themselves those questions? Is that the point?
It is the hope. And here's the thing. Everyone who designs an action that they know is going to be disruptive, they already know that they're going to people who are going to be very critical of them, and they're going to people who are going to be trying to debate the appropriateness of the action. They are already aware of that. But what I do think it should do, especially if someone decides to go with the action anyway, I think it's worth, and I think Nakimba Levy Armstrong did this, I think it's important to respond. It is exactly, by the way, if you've read Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, remember it was written in response to white clergy who criticized the Birmingham campaign for being unwise and untimely, who said that there should be a gradual approach, who said that they care more about law and order than about the injustice that the King campaign was pointing out. And so he wrote this entire treatise to say, okay, I heard you, but let me tell you what I need from you if you do care about the injustice as you have said that you do. And by the way, like I said, people are well within their right to criticize and to question it. But I hope that the next step, and I think Miss Armstrong really made that clear in her press conference afterwards. The question is, what are you willing to do about the thing that we were calling attention to? Are you willing to join us? What does your solidarity look like? What does your action look like? And the reason that's an appropriate question, by the way, it's the same kind of question that King posed to his detractors. If that's what you're trying to do, then you really do have to tell us and be honest about it. Where is your line here? Line not in terms of line in the sand, but your line. Where do you think this is going? Are you going to, or do you want the status quo? And there are many who do. If you say that this approach should be gradual, is the gradualism in service to the justice we're trying to seek? Or does it inadvertently keep us with the status quo? These are things that people who don't like the action have to ask themselves. Where do I want to go? What do I want to see? How fast do I want to get there? And what is my responsibility to the people who feel more urgency than I do, especially if they're impacted by it materially and personally?
Dr. DeWayne Davis, you're making a ton of sense, and you are really just a compelling speaker. I know that is part and parcel of the work that you do in this world. You're a minister, but you are also a human being. Does any part of you, given the S-storm that is hitting the Twin Cities right now, go, I am so glad I didn't win? I am so glad I'm not the mayor. Like, human to human, are you just like, whew, good luck, Jacob? Like, I got to go speak at an MLK thing. I'll be back. You know, like.
You know what? It's probably not going to redound positively on me, but I will tell you the exact thing that I said to my husband, especially when the surge happened. And before Renee Good was killed, actually. But it was just the news out there. But the first thing I said to him was, I dodged a bullet. And I'm going to be honest with you. Had I won, were I mayor at this point, I think it would actually be worse. Because I am convinced that Donald Trump is provoked by the sight of people of color and by leaders of color. And so in some ways, there is a little bit of relief, too, because as bad as it is and as terrible as they behaved, I think it would have been a lot worse if I were mayor of the city. They would have acted a lot worse if I were mayor of the city.
Well, and I think you exemplify too that there are actions that you can take and things you can continue to do outside of public office. Can you talk a little bit about that? You might not be in that position, but what are things that folks can do who have an ear from their followers and supporters?
I'm so glad you asked that, but and I think it's happening now. What you're seeing, especially as I think the faith communities take the lead on this, people are joining in with their communities, certainly to be observers and all of the things that are directly related to the ICE surge, but they are also really responding generously in terms of helping communities and helping families. But here's another thing that I will say, especially for those who had a reaction against that action at City's Church. The one thing I want you to do is to seriously think about what you can do, what your circle of influence is, and how you can begin to engage in real conversation, even if you are uncomfortable or unsure. Engage that conversation. And here's why I'm inviting people to do that. I don't think I'm exaggerating, given what we've gone through. Our democracy has faltered. And it is a fast track to even worse kinds of injustice and illegal activity and autocratic response. And so things that you didn't think you were going to do, I really am inviting people to think very clearly about that so that you can begin to look around yourself, look around and see how you can engage. For me, for instance, the one thing I think we need to double down on, and I'm working with some nonprofits about this, around how do we fortify democratic participation that in some ways may not be sexy or seem to be a little bit far, but we've got an election coming up in the fall, and an election that is going to be tampered with. That's not a conspiracy. That's not an exaggeration. The president of the United States has said that there are things that he wants to do. And we've seen that action in terms of the redistricting they've done. So even something like that, if you're not comfortable with, directly engaging in this ICE surge, how about fortifying democracy? Getting people to think about how to engage local government and the federal government. How about one of those campaigns, getting involved and getting active, people connecting with people who are going to do it. So what I'm arguing for is anything that you can do for the purpose of either resisting what's happening or fortifying a democracy that is faltering. Figure that out. Do it. Be engaged. Even if it's if it's a mutual aid activity, do it, because that is what's going to hold us. It is civil society. It is organized community that always challenges autocracy. That's the work that I did in Washington for many years, especially in places like Uganda and Eastern Europe, for LGBTQ people all throughout the 90s. What we were doing was trying to stand up and fortify civil society on the ground to do these kinds of things that we're doing right here, so that we can have that real laboratory of democracy that is activated when our government doesn't know how to support it or is actively engaged in stopping it. I hope that was helpful.
Dr. DeWayne Davis, I can affirm that was very helpful, and I know what you're doing to fortify our country, and I appreciate it, and I salute you, and I thank you coming on CityCast Twin Cities to chat about this particular situation, but also open the lens wider, which is always valuable to do, even in times of crisis. Thank you very much for being with us, and sending love to you and your family, and of course to the church that you represent as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Winter, and Happy New Year. I still think I can say that. So thank you for the conversation, and thank you for having the conversation, because I think we need to have it more so people can understand what's going on with communities, even when we have questions about what we've seen. So thank you so much.
We'd love to hear from you. What are you doing, and what do you think about what others are doing? Send us a text or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline. The number is 612-217-0637. We love hearing from you, and we'd love to include your thoughts in an upcoming mailbag segment. There's more news to discuss, but before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Minnesota Opera is presenting My Name is Florence, running January 31st through February 8th at the Ordway in downtown St. Paul. This is a world premiere, a brand new opera by composer B.E. Boykin and St. Paul-based librettist Harrison David Rivers. The opera tells the story of Florence Price, an American composer who was the first Black woman to have a symphony performed by a major U.S. orchestra. The opera also explores themes of identity, creativity, family, legacy, and resilience. It's great for audiences who are newer to opera. They got a catchy score that includes influences from musical styles like jazz, gospel, R&B, and hip-hop. This piece will be the first of several premieres from Minnesota Opera's New Works initiative to see the stage over the next several seasons. Minnesota Opera is one of the leading opera companies in the United States when it comes to premiering new works. Previous commissions like Silent Night have received national recognition. In fact, the composer won a Pulitzer Prize. We're right here in your backyard. Join us and be a part of history. Turns out, spoiler alert, creating online dating sites did not create some kind of seamless dating experience that is perfect. In fact, it's created a lot of unique problems. It solved some problems too, but it certainly created some. And we're always going to need new ways to meet people and new ways to connect. And CityCast Twin Cities recently connected with Pitch a Friend. In fact, we're sponsoring an upcoming night of theirs. It's going down 1 week from today at Brewhaven in Minneapolis. And right now we're chatting with Jackie Carper from Pitch a Friend. And this event, again, is free, and it's at Brewhaven on Thursday, January 29th at 6:30. Jackie, first off, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. Pitch a Friend could create a lot of nervousness in folks who are like, oh, should I go? Like, oh, how's it going to go? So let's let people know what happens for folks who head out to Brewhaven on Thursday night of next week. What should they expect?
For sure. I hear that all the time. It's very low pressure. Okay. What's going to happen is you show up and friends are going to give a PowerPoint presentation on some of the awesome single people in their life. You're definitely going to laugh. You might cry. If you want to talk to someone, if you're single, then do it. And if you don't, then leave after the entertainment. So it's very low pressure. You wear a green name tag if you're single. So it's very clear who's ready to mingle in the room.
Yeah, and Jackie, is there a theme for this one? I've heard that there have been themes in the past.
Yeah, so I'm so excited for this one. I think it really goes along with CityCast and with community building, which we're all about. It's artist theme, so everyone being pitched is a single artist of whatever medium they identify with. Very excited. All of the wing people are going to showcase their friends' art as well. So very excited. You don't have to be an artist to just be in the audience, just be an art lover, I suppose. And yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so fun.
I am pitching my friend Amy. For somebody in my situation where you go, I got this woman in my life who I adore, who I think is wonderful, and I'd love to help just sort of like broadcast how awesome she is to a larger audience. How does it work if you want to be the pitcher and actually telling somebody about your homegirl or your friend?
Yeah, it's awesome, right? I don't personally know another place where you get to be this strong of a wing person for your friends. So if you go into the mindset when you're making your presentation that I'm just telling people why they're awesome, I think that would help. If you want to be kind of funny about it, I think themes are really good. So a theme to your presentation, and otherwise, yeah, you can be wholesome and just tell us, who they are. This is the cool part about the events, right? Versus a dating site, maybe where people aren't super authentic or you don't really get to know them. Here you do. And also you're hearing from their friends, so you know that they can't lie. That's cool. So yeah, that's my advice for the presentation.
What happens after the presentation? Does everybody just kind of mingle and seek out their, prospective pitch that they really liked?
Yeah, like I said, it's low pressure and it's not a speed dating event, okay? I'm not going to play a Cupid for anyone, unfortunately. So if someone catches your eye, you got to go up to them and you got to tell them. That's the other cool part, though, is that your non-single wing people can come with you, right? And give you some of that courage if you need it. We also share the contact information for everyone that was pitched. So if you're not feeling bold that night, you can use that too. But yep, after the presentations happen, normally there's like 6 to 10 of them. Then there's open mingling time where you get that opportunity to go up to someone that caught your eye, whether they were pitched or not.
Supposing you are neither a pitcher or a pitchee, and maybe you're not even in the market to date somebody, is it kind of like forbidden to just show up and be a spectator, or are there a lot of people just sort of taking in the vibe?
No, tons of people are taking in the vibe. Sometimes we get the negative feedback that there's not enough single people, but personally, I love that. I love that our community is just coming out to either support their friends. We're just a really fun way to spend a weekday too. I don't know another event where people are just hyping up their friends with a PowerPoint. So if you want to see what we're all about, come through. Again, if you're single, you'll wear a green name tag so we don't lead anybody on. And I'd also say a lot of people come and like check it out, see the presentations before they give a presentation themselves so they can kind of catch the vibe and get some ideas.
Well, Jackie Carper, we're really excited to be sponsoring this upcoming one, which is happening on Thursday, January 29th, aka 1 week from today. It's at 6:30 p.m. at Brewhaven Craft Company in Minneapolis, and I will be pitching a friend, and I'm looking forward to hanging out as well. Jackie, thank you for hanging out with us today on CityCast Twin Cities.
Thank you, guys. Excited to have you there, and I hope everyone listening comes and we fill the spot and help your friends find love.
We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever pitched a friend before? How did it feel? Let us know by texting us or leaving us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline. The number is 612-217-0637. We've got more to get to. Before we do that, we'll take a quick break. Since Operation Metro Surge in the Twin Cities, I've been talking a lot about silver linings, about the good things that are happening. And today I'm going to stop saying silver linings because there's too many of them for them to just be a lining. I'm thinking about the way that the Twin Cities has responded to ICE being here as first, second, and third lines of defense. We're mounting a resistance to a federal occupation, and we're doing that through community patrol, through neighborhood networks that keep our neighbors safe and fed. We're doing it through art and joy. We're doing it through general strikes, but we're also doing it through witness, through journalism, and through documentation. And I would be remiss to not shout out a lot of the more well-known media organizations in the Twin Cities, spots like the Star Tribune, the Pioneer Press, Sahan Journal, Minnesota Public Radio, MinPost, the Minnesota Reformer, Racket, and many others. I think of all those at different levels of sort of institutions. And I think this is a gray area because some of these places started off really scrappy and are now more established. But today I want to highlight some journalists who work independently. I'm talking about a one-person shop or maybe a very small staff. And in fact, I wrote up a piece for CityCast that's talking about 5 independent journalists that are worth following. And I want to run down these folks now. So Winter, I know you're very intimately aware of what is happening in the world of Twin Cities journalism. You ready for me to cover a couple people?
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. I love the list that you came up with. I follow them every day, so I appreciate the roundup.
Well, I want to shout out Georgia Fort, who is an independent journalist who definitely comes from the world of legacy media. I mean, I used to drive past a bunch of Georgia Fort billboards. She was on TV. She was everywhere, but I think she's taken not a left turn, but like a turn in her career since 2023. She founded the Center for Broadcast Journalism. This place has a low-power radio station, Power 104.7 on the east side of St. Paul. It's also connected to another Georgia Fort organization, Black Press, and it also is where Georgia Fort does her own journalism. And I want to give my sort of particular tip of the hat to her, not for only being at a lot of stories early, but for staying on a lot of stories longer. So I've seen follow-ups about things that have happened weeks after, and certainly sometimes months after mainstream media has stopped covering them. I'm still seeing what Georgia Fort does. She is a national treasure. She's really recognized nationally, but she is an incredible local resource for us right now. Winter, when did you find out about Unicorn Riot?
Well, you highlighted that they've been around for a long time. I think it was interesting reading about Daunte Wright, and I think I actually read about that even before I moved here and followed some of Unicorn Riot's work. And so I think that it's interesting to see the reach that independent media has even outside of the Twin Cities, especially on social media and things like that.
Unicorn Riot, I think, put the cameras in the right place with a lot of courage, particularly after the murder of George Floyd, and then also falling into coverage of the killing of Daunte Wright at the hands of a Brooklyn Center police officer. Here's a weird thing for you, Winter. The first way I had any connection to Unicorn Riot was playing pickup basketball with Nico in like 2004. I think he was like filming hip hop videos and was friends with my guy, Zach. And so like when he started being a big national thing, I was like, didn't we used to play over at Luther Seminary by 280? But now, as you mentioned, like Unicorn Ride has become to some extent a gold standard for live streams and for covering stuff on the ground. They do have folks all around the country and beyond, but it's based right here in Minneapolis. And following Unicorn Ride is a surefire way to find out about things and see them being covered extremely well.
Yeah, no, I think that they really highlight the importance of recording on scene and on site. We saw that with George Floyd and it being here and it kind of the mecca of where people are recording, and that's making a difference, I think is really representative of the cities, and it shows too in how local they are. If you were playing pickup basketball, that's how you get people on the scene, and that's why independent journalism is so important too.
You mentioned the importance of being on site, and I want to give a shout out to On-Site Public Media. And at the helm of that is a person I consider a friend, Toussaint Morrison, and he's the primary voice of On-Site Public Media. And again, it is valuable to get cameras at spots and covering that, and I think On-Site Public Media does some of that. What I really appreciate with On-Site Public Media is the digestion and a little bit of the humor, where there'll be actually, here's a news story. I'm going to tell you how I frame that, how I see that, and I'm going to pop in 2 little jokes that make it sticky, that make it more shareable, and often really make you question what you think about what you're seeing in a way that just raw information doesn't always elicit that sort of self-discovery. I find that the work that On-Site Public Media does really valuable. So I tip my hat to my friend Toussaint Morrison and the work that he's doing over there.
Another thing I've seen with Toussaint recently is he's been doing a really great job being skeptical of legacy media too, looking at, say the TV station that runs with the initial story that was pitched by the feds and being skeptical of that and showing really what's happening on scene also, and just giving that wider context of where information is coming from. I think On-Site's been nailing it when it comes to that.
I want to give a shout out to Taylor Dolan as well, who is really a resource year round, but particularly around elections. So in this case, a lot of what I value about Taylor's work involves stuff about the fact that there's information that people just don't go find, not because it's obscured, but because it's in the back of a document or it's something that other people didn't bother to look at. And we trust journalists to be dogged and to take in a lot of the boring information that becomes salacious news when it's put through the right frame. And Taylor Dolan does an excellent job of that. And again, really love Taylor during political seasons, but this dogged work of diving in deep is valuable year round, year in, year out. There's still a ton of great information that Taylor is sharing on X. I hate calling it X, and Blue Sky. I love calling it Blue Sky.
Yeah, I love Taylor's humor. It's great to see. It's fun to get a little bit of that in the serious, but also really it's a great way to point out the idiosyncrasies of how public office works.
And I want to tip my hat to King Demetrius Pendleton, who is doing spectacular work, and particularly photojournalism right now during ICE's presence in the Twin Cities, and was recognized early on as being the first photojournalist that was on site after the murder of George Floyd. His work throughout the summer of 2020 is the backbone of the first book that he's released as a photographer, The Movement Never Stops. And he's gotten a ton of awards. Beyond that, though, he's really been in the thick of things, including very recently being shot with a chemical munitions canister while covering protests at the Whipple Federal Building. And everybody on this list has put themselves at risk to some extent. And this work is very important. This work is worth that risk. And I tip my hat to King Demetrius Pendleton, both for the risks he takes and for the photos and documentation that he brings back from those. So amazing coverage from King Demetrius Pendleton. We're going to have an article with those names up on CityCast's website. Winter, do you want to shout out some of the journalists that you really count on in the Twin Cities?
Sean, you covered so many that I really appreciated. Also, like on Twitter, I follow Aaron Ruper, who has over 1 million followers, but also he has a newsletter on Substack. But then in general, I do want to highlight too that while we're highlighting these independent journalists, I think having a healthy balance of independent journalism plus the other nonprofit, for-profit journalism that we have in the cities is really important. A lot of times you're going to see people posing as independent journalists who are really just reading an article in the Strib and then parsing it out in their own way, which is actually really important in its own right. And there's definitely a need for aggregators and all of that. But I always encourage people to also be diverse in the way that they consume news. And especially right now, you're going to obviously see plenty of dis and misinformation out and about. And sometimes people accidentally share that, even if their intent is good. So I'd say, still call on your legacy media to some degree. And we have such a robust nonprofit news market too. It's the Han, Racket, MinnPost, The Reformer. So just make sure that you're constantly following all of the great journalism that's happening and being skeptical in your own right. But it's just great to see the amount of coverage that we have here.
Winter, if you weren't on this episode, I might be putting you on this list. I've read your byline for a long time when you were working at MinnPost, and you've done spectacular work as an independent journalist here in the Twin Cities as well. Not surprised that you are a scholar of who else is doing great work, but thank you for the work you're doing in the Twin Cities, and thank you for joining us today.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for giving another platform where I can keep covering the important things that are happening.
And now it's time for a conversation about one of our sponsors with CityCast executive producer Anna Weigel. Now, Anna, this week's 36th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday breakfast brought people together on Monday to honor Dr. King's legacy and remind us about getting involved in our communities.
There were a lot of events celebrating Dr. King this week, and we wrote about a lot of them on our website and newsletter, but the theme of this year's breakfast was Make a Career of Humanity. I really like that.
I like that. And frankly, I like this breakfast event. It has been something that I've been to a handful of times, and it got started, or I guess it got started before I was in high school, but I've been hearing about it since I was in high school. And this is a nationally recognized event. It's one of the largest breakfast celebrations honoring Dr. King. And this year, Xcel Energy was a proud sponsor.
Yeah, and the event directly supports UNCF Twin Cities to provide college scholarships for students.
And providing scholarships for students is what UNCF is all about. For more than 80 years, they've raised over $6 billion to help students across the country attend college, graduate, and become leaders.
And they provide financial support to historically Black colleges and universities.
Another collaborator for Xcel Energy is Hands On Twin Cities. They provide year-round opportunities to commit to service and support local communities.
It's such a good way for people to get involved in our community throughout the year.
So to learn more about either of these organizations, I want to give you their websites. You can visit uncf.org or handsontwincities.org. That's all for today here on CityCast Twin Cities. I'm your host, Sean McPherson, Dr. DeWayne Davis, Winter Keefer, Jackie Carper, and Anna Weigel. Thanks for being here today. You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Twin Cities newsletter. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with a news enthusiast? We'll see you back here tomorrow for more news from around the city.